Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself. I'm John. I always have been. 46 years I've been doing this. Still John. Still just three letters, also known as regular EV Dad. And today on the podcast, a surprise to absolutely nobody, is Joe from EV Motoring. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing pretty well. I guess it would only be a surprise if I was using a car that wasn't a Tesla on my road trip, because as you know, with Tesla road trips, you just show up to the supercharger and it just works. It's such a great experience.
So that's where we're going to start this week, apparently. I put hours of work into these introductions, and you just take a bitchy pill. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We have been away for a little bit longer than we planned, but for good reason, and we're going to talk about those reasons in a minute. So, for you, our listener, we are going to talk about road trips, which we've both taken, and our experiences, and then we're going to talk about what's going on with Tesla chargers, because it's not just the Magic Dock and stuff, but the V4 and other elements have happened. And then I'm going to talk about a car which I'm excited about, the Kia EV9, which we have now seen real life production versions of, or soon to be production versions of. And then and then I'm going to bitch about VW, just because. So on that bombshell, Joe, freshly back from Phoenix and
Vegas and Phoenix. Yep. So
how did the Wish app version of a Tesla fare? How did your discount half battery car do? How did your Nissan Leaf with a fart horn equip itself?
By the way, speaking of fart horns, we now have a verified fart as one of the options to choose. So it makes a fart noise with a tweet sound and a blue check mark. It's the little things in life, you know. So 4,000 miles, and I think this might have been the easiest road trip I've done yet, just as far as simplicity. Every road trip I've been on in the past, at some point, inevitably you show up at, an EA location that just is not, up to par, and you have to call tech support, and you're 15 to 20 minutes later of down the hole of waiting to get the chargers activated, and it delays you on the trip. And the thing and it's caused me to have the comments on past videos with other owners of VWs and such, that they like to charge a little deeper to try to skip as many charging locations as possible rather than charger hopping, just out of the fear of that. Whereas with this car, I charger hopped pretty much every time I could. And I also used Electrify America when I could, since I have that adapter, and that worked out great to save some money, especially in Nebraska. And I did it in the cities that had Tesla chargers across the street anyway. So whenever I was utilizing EA, it was because either there was a station was over half full, so I was going to get slow charging from the superchargers since they power share on the version 2s, or it was just to plain out just save a bunch of money, because I could get a 60% of battery added for $7, $6. Can't complain about that on the fast charging world. Which these were the pricing. I think as we spoke last time, this was before EA pushed through the pricing changes. So I'm not sure how that would have impacted my cost on the trip. But your car worked great. I was in some pretty wicked snowstorms, and the rear wheel drive never was an issue. I think the traction control is pretty well sorted on that. The battery size is the only thing that ever became an issue, potentially, because when I was going from Santa Fe to Omaha, I kind of took that route back. I didn't go through Oklahoma City. So I was zigzagging on a bunch of farm roads, basically, to get from, I'm going to draw a blank on the city now. It's basically southeastern Colorado up to, through Colby, Kansas, up to Kearney, Nebraska. It's kind of the zigzag route that I took. those two jumps, especially with cold weather and about a 10-mile-an-hour headwind, I had a charge to about 95+%, and I was arriving with 1 to 2%. So
Yeah.
the car was certainly being pushed to its limits. And at times on both those drives, I was driving at the speed limit or even a little below, just out of concern of, everything was kind of pinned against me of the wet temperature dropping and pretty stiff headwind. So, but I still was able to get over 200 miles out of the battery on a full charge. So that's, on par for everything I've owned in the past.
Yeah, I found that, when I took the standard range up to Seattle, it didn't, the only place I really felt, because I was doing, no, I called it rip and run. What did you call it? Oh, charger hopping.
Yeah.
So I did charger hop that trip. The only place I felt a little let down is just how many miles I could get under my belt before I had to stop. And, living here in San Jose and heading north on I-5, it's 232 miles to Anderson. And I can do that in the ID4.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it because my bladder has always given up at Willows, about 50 miles south. It is my dream that one day I will be able to make it all the way to Anderson. But then if I did that, I'd have to get there during the opening hours of the Safeway supermarket. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pee in a bush.
One thing that I noticed that was interesting is with EA, we're so used to, at least me across the Midwest, it's about 90 to 100 miles between chargers. And that tends to be a nice, as you mentioned, rip and run kind of number. With the Teslas, it tends to be more like about 60 or 70 miles. Yeah. So it's like, do I want to charge to 80% to try to skip the one in the middle? But when I'm pulling 170 kilowatts and I'm a 5-minute charge to move down the road, it's hard to, as long as the chargers are in good locations right off the highway, it's hard to not, hit more locations than less. So it was around a meal.
I think that's the difference is that, when I think about the chargers on I-5, they're not all right off there's a lot of them, like when you have to go to a Walmart, that's not always right off the freeway. You don't have to go through town, but you're easily adding 5 minutes just from off-ramp to charger.
Lincoln, Nebraska was that way. The Tesla supercharger was far more off the highway.
The one is that Grand Junction or North Platte? I can't remember which one it is, but yeah,
Lincoln. So a couple chargers east of that, but the Electrify America is pretty accessible, and the Tesla chargers actually a little bit more out of the way going to a Meyer. So, and the Tesla charger had a couple of broken handles and was consistently showing that there was some vehicles there. So it's just like, I'm not even going to mess with it. EA was the way to go on that one. Although the EA only 2 of the 4 chargers were working, but that's neither here or there.
Yeah. And so, in this highly, by the way, for the listener who comments on how often I'm yawning or whatever, I'm going to be moving around a lot. That's because I put my back out at the weekend on one of the trips we're going to talk about. And so I'm wearing a back brace right now and taking some pretty good medication, which has not slowed me down from the stupid, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So don't complain about John shifting around. It's because I'm in pain, real pain. How did you find, your winter is different than our winter is wet. Your winter is cold. So how did you find that affected the Tesla's performance?
So the heat pump definitely seemed to help compared to cars I've owned in the past. With that said, when I was driving from Phoenix, which is at a fairly low elevation, I got from Phoenix all the way to Colorado at, above 75 miles an hour and about 4 miles per kilowatt hour average, or just a fraction under. But in the cold, it's definitely around 3 to 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour I was getting. And the winds might not have been identical in both situations, but they weren't dramatic. So I never had to, use the microphones, for example. Most trips, I'm always like, oh, I got to grab the mics because my phone's just going to sound like a disaster. And this wasn't too much of that. But
interesting. So I, as I said, I took on 2 trips. I think we talked about one of them. I'm trying to remember if we did it on the podcast. It was just you and me. So spring break weekend, or ski week as we call it. I guess it's ski week because spring week's yet to come. Mrs. Garside went to Austin without me. Can you imagine that? She went to my town without me. It was wrong. She took the kiddo. And the plan was that I would drive down to San Diego. I was going to meet them there for a dog show. And we'd then spend the weekend down there before, and then drive back on the Sunday. Well, Mrs. Regular EV was quite clear that she wanted me to drive the e-tron down, which I wasn't against. However, to make that a quick trip, it needed Electrify America to deliver. So I have been using Out of Specs Twitter handle. What's it called? Rate Your Charge.
Yep.
And I have been putting up little videos. I'm pleased to say, so on the way down, I used the new charger at Kettleman. This is a 10 charger site, crucial to the I-5 corridor, San Francisco to LA. Takes a lot of pressure off of Harris Ranch, which when I came back a week earlier, there was a queue of people there, and you just don't want to be, you don't want to be queuing when you've got 50 kilowatt cars. That's the problem with queuing with Electrify America is not every car charges fast, and to be stuck with just behind a bolt is frustrating. I stopped at Kettleman, charged up to 80%, and then I was heading for LA. And I was going to meet my new boss, who had an Airbnb in Santa Monica. And so the original plan was, because I didn't know exactly what time it was going to be, that I would message him, and I was going to charge at a EV Go, 100 kilowatt plus EV Go in Santa Monica while we had coffee. And literally we were going to get coffee while charging, and then I was going to keep going to San Diego. But that would have put me all the way to San Diego on a 2-stop strategy. Because of the issues that Kyle had, literally like 4 or 5 days earlier at Shell Bakersfield, Electrify America, I called in to see if they'd fix it. I plugged in, and I literally plugged in, ran to the men's room and came back. And I had more than enough energy because Santa Monica didn't happen. The bad weather we've been getting was really screwing with his trip. And I ended up all the way on the south side of LA. That's how fast that thing charges. I mean, I think it's like 40 miles. No, it must be more. It's 30 miles to it. So it's like 60 miles, maybe a bit less, 50 miles. But in 6 minutes, it had already put so much more in. Then I get to South LA. It's called something Island. I can't remember what it was. It was in a Target. It had 6 chargers. 3 of them weren't working. And none of them were connected to the network. So everything was complimentary charging, which when you have to pay for your charging is great. But I lucked out by the fact that I got in just as someone was leaving. And then got into it with other people. As a courtesy to our listener, I'm just going to blow my nose. I do apologize.
That's actually something that I've I've witnessed. I do miss some of the free complimentary chargers around here, especially now that I have this car that I could utilize the complimentary chargers with the CCS adapter. However, I also remember in the past, back in September and October, it was about a couple months that everything was complimentary. The queues were the biggest queues I've witnessed at Electrify America, just because everyone and their mother that has an electric vehicle was there taking advantage of complimentary charging.
Well, let me answer this. So I was meeting Mrs. Vigor EV and the kids from the off the plane in San Diego, and we were going to need we're going to need enough in the battery to both get to the hotel and then run errands the next day. And the e-tron's kind of thirsty on the little things. So I did charge to 99% at that charger. Now, bear in mind, my car is still pulling 60 at 99%. So it's not exactly...
it's still, even at 99%, better than a Bolt.
Yeah. And I then got down to... And the reason I did it is because San Diego, ironically, there's not a lot of 100 kilowatt plus chargers in the San Diego area. There's a lot of them coming on stream, but none of them were in any locations, because we were staying up in Del Mar to the north. The hotel didn't have... The hotel had charging. Actually, let me just clear this up. The hotel did not have charging, but you could go and park in the hotel next door, which is owned by the same investment group. They wanted $150 an hour for charging, for level 2 charging. Okay, 6 kilowatt. Okay, I'll live with that. That's what, 25 cents, 20 cents a kilowatt. Okay, fine. With a 4-hour maximum. How the hell do you charge for a maximum of 4 hours when you're trying to sleep?
Yeah. So I was at actually, this happened in multiple locations, but let's just start with Breckenridge. We had talked about that transportation hub or whatever that they had there, right? People used it for commuting.
Oh, no, we didn't. No, hold on, listener. We didn't talk about this on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Because we didn't want to say something stupid, because I did something. Joe, do you sure you want to talk about this?
Well, I'll gladly talk about it, because it's more than just this location. I was looking at PlugShare. Everything that was a public, funded by or owned, and property that was definitely owned by Frisco and Breckenridge, they all had the same policy of 4 hours for free, and then like $20 an hour with a maximum of like $50 or something extreme. And the interesting part was, this was at least for the bus stop. Okay, so like the DMV, understandable. You shouldn't be at the DMV more than 4 hours. But at this transportation hub, it's designed for somebody to show up there.
Yeah, how do you... That's nuts.
Take a bus to like Copper Mountain. You work there for the day, 8 hours.
Or Denver.
Or, yeah, right. And then you come back and get your car. Well, if I'm only getting 4 hours free, who in their right mind is going to pay $50, because they would be on the charger all day, to fill their battery? Makes no sense. So for me, I car camped. So I plugged in for 3 hours and 45 minutes. And at midnight, I unplugged and woke up, 7 hours later with about 20% less battery, which is neither here or there. But yeah, there's no way I was going to pay that extreme fee to just be on the charger all night.
So let me add to what Joe was saying here. This is what we weren't going to talk about. When I took the Tesla up to Seattle, I found a level 2 charger, which was actually in a hotel car park. It was paid charging with Noodle, which I think is owned by Enel now. But anyway,
those are what are at. I use those as well. They were at Treasure Island Hotel. So I parked there. I was like, I'll get free parking. Well, the charging costs so much that I should have just paid for parking at New York, and gotten free electricity.
Yeah. So I literally camped in the car. I plugged the car in while I slept in it, and I had it in camp mode. And I will say, because it was below, and my hair's crazy today. Camp mode, actually, even with the the heater running, because it was in the low 30s when I was sleeping in it. It actually did a pretty good job and got the car up to, I think it was 80-90%. It did its job. So that heat pump and however else it's doing it is the efficiency is really, really good on the Tesla. It has to be said.
In Frisco, it was single digits, like 4 degrees, and so my feet were definitely a little bit chilled, but certainly I was not cold by any stretch. So yeah, it's a pretty impressive heating system.
So let me continue this, because unfortunately this turns into a bit of a story and a rant, which I didn't put on Twitter or anything like that, and that's because I've had time to think about this, and I've decided which version I want to actually put out into the world, because it kind of opens me up to a problem. So I get to San Diego. I checked into the hotel. I dropped off all the gear. Oh, I should point out with e-tron, we had the roof box on as well. So I think there's a picture of it on definitely on Twitter and definitely on I put a community post on my YouTube channel. And it doesn't make a huge difference, by the way, in terms of efficiency with the roof box until you go above 75. And above 75, it's like driving into a wall with the e-tron. It just delivers 2 all the time. And everything else that we lost was all the other issues, the mileage I lost, because I was running about 10% light, was the cold and the wind. So I get to San Diego, I've checked in, and just with one thing and another, I'm down to, I'm going to say 50%. And I thought, you know what? It's late, because their flight didn't arrive till 11 o'clock. I said, I'll drive out my way to an EA site, and I'll just plug in. And there's an EA site near a supercharger at a mall.
I've been to that one.
Fashion mall. And it's got 3 of the older ABB units in it.
2 of them, and then the other one's like a spot across with the Chatamo. Yep.
There you go. The spot across had a Taycan in it. That's the 150. There was an ID4 plugged in and a Bolt. I think it was a Bolt. I plugged in. I'm waiting for a spot, and there's no one parked around. So I kind of just pull in, close, but not right next to. A Lucid turns up. He sees me. I flash my lights. He flashes his lights. He pulls in next to me. Then a black Nero pulls up, goes around all the way around the island, and goes on the other side. Taycan then unplugs and takes what could only be a period of time described as forever to actually unplug the car. He was on the phone holding the charging handle, holding it for a minute or more.
He liked the way it felt in his hands.
Apparently so. And as he is doing this, the Nero comes out and is assuming that they're first in the line. Now, I'd already had to do some, let's call it line marshalling at the Target in South LA, where, getting people in the right order. And so I flashed my lights, and this person ignored it. So I wound down my window, and I waved to try to get their attention, and this person ignored it. And the Taycan guy, thankfully, still was not entirely conscious. So I get out of the car, and I walk over, and I walked across the front of her car, and I'm looking at her. Hi. She winds down a window. I said, hi. Don't know if you noticed, there's a queue. We're on this side. Now, listener, judge, don't judge. Understand that if this becomes an issue, then there is a witness to the whole thing who, God bless them, is following me on Instagram, on my comedy handle, on British John Comedy, in case I needed to get an affidavit from him for the police. That's where this story is about to go, boys and girls.
Was this listener the Taycan or the Lucid?
Hold on. So I'm talking to the lady in the Nero, young lady in the Nero, and she says, I said, she goes, but I have to get home. Okay. So do we. We don't live here. She goes, but I legally have to get home. I said, I legally have to pick my kid up from the airport. But you know, that there's a line, there's a queue. And she goes, I'm at school. Okay. My kid goes to school. She goes, I have to get back. And I can't remember the exact word you said, but I have a curfew, a legally enforced curfew. I'm like, well, unless your father is the president of the United States, I don't imagine that that's actually a thing. And then she goes, I said, but we have a queue. And you know, you're after the Lucid. But the good news is we both have fast charging cars. Well, couldn't I charge for a bit? Well, how much battery do you have? And I want to be clear about here because I cared about whether I don't want to send somebody off into the wilderness. I know how much charge my car's got. I also know how long it's going to take hers to charge. I also know that what time my wife's flight's coming in. But you know, I judge people. Yes, I judge people, but on their character, not on the blondness of their hair. Anyway, we'll get to that. And she goes, I'm nearly empty. My mom forgot to charge it. I'm a big fan of blaming others for your mistakes. And I said, well, you know, we have a system here. She goes, well, I've been driving around all the other chargers trying to find a spot. I said, that's a choice you made. We decided to just wait at this one location our turns. And at which point I said, she said, and I can't remember the exact thing. Unfortunately, this is a couple of weeks ago now. I do have a recording of the affidavit because I recorded an affidavit of this as soon as it happened, which is good practice if you ever get into one of these situations. And I said to her, I said, okay, what's more important, you or my daughter? She goes, me. I'm like, okay. You're at school? She said, yes. I said, well, then today's word you need to learn is hypocrisy. The guy with the ID4, really cool guy, was listening to the entire exchange, could not believe how rude or whatever she was. Anyway, she drove off. Just one of those crazy situations where it wasn't just me that, you know, like there's the Lucid. Now, here's where it gets funny because karma can come back to haunt you. Joe, as you might be well aware, we've had these river rains coming through, atmospheric rivers. I plug in my car. It starts raining, and the rain hits the damn screen and kept stopping the charger. Because the rain was it was such fat rain that the charger kept thinking it was me hitting the close button. And it did that on both the chargers. And yeah, the Lucid Air, my God, that thing charges like an absolute beast. I'm surprised the lights don't dim around when you plug that thing in. But anyway, I do think, and I've mentioned it before, Electrify America, I don't want a reservations system, but there should be. They know where you are. They've got the GPS from your phone. They know where you are when you got there. They need to start creating a queuing system.
I agree. And ChargePoint has kind of something.
Yep, ChargePoint does it. They do it for the level 2 chargers.
You get a notification when someone's unplugging.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because you should. So I the other day I took the kid. This is how I did my back-in. I took the kid up to the Sierras in the e-tron, and as he's our way, there's a 62.5 kilowatt charger at Oakdale on the way. But just over halfway, and because of the cold, because it really is the Sierras. It's, you know, I charged the car up to 100%. You know, when he was stuck up there without any juice, and yeah, of course, the one time I turn up in the middle of nowhere, both chargers are in use. And here's an interesting one thing for you. I never tweeted it out. So a lady was charging her Kia Soul with the CHAdeMO, and it was at 72%, and it was drawing 1 kilowatt. 1 kilowatt. I'm not blaming her, by the way, because as far as she said, it slows down around 80%, and you know what? That sounds about right. But the fact that it was down to 1 kilowatt, and it actually helped her. I said, well, this isn't self-serving. I mean, it is, but it wasn't. If you plug into the level 2 charger right next to us, you'll actually get a faster charge. She went, no. I said, trust me, that will put 6.5 into your car. Right now, you're only getting 1. Now, I don't know if that's normal. I don't know the charging curve of a 5-year-old, 6-year-old Kia Soul. I don't know. But I did find it ridiculous that it was charging at 1 kilowatt.
So when I was in, I forget, it's a small town in southern Idaho. Terrible charging at the Electrify America location. There was 1 of 4 chargers working. This was a couple trips ago. This was the ID4. And so one charger was working at 33 or 34 kilowatts peak speed. And there was a queue, of course. So there was an ID4 in front of me, then there was me, but most importantly, in front of that, the one that was plugged in at that moment was an i3. And they were at 95, 96% when I got there. And they're just standing around talking, yada, yada. And then I happen to look at the screen. I'm like, they're pulling 3 kilowatts. I'm like, we're going to be here. We're looking at an hour-long charge each over here anyway, because there's no other chargers around. And I'm like, what, do you know where you're headed next? And she's like, yeah, just down to, the next charger down the road. And it was like 80 miles. And I'm like, well, you realize, because she's like, well, we're just going to go into the store now. And I'm like, what have you been doing for the last hour? Yeah.
Yeah. We need to get, education's important, but we need technology to help. I saw just over this past week, I have seen so many cars idling with 20 minutes plus. I just for they've got to start bringing down the hammer. They really do, to maximize this infrastructure. Let me go back to the story. So we do the San Diego thing. We leave San Diego Sunday morning. I-5 is closed. The Grapevine is closed, which means we have to go all the way around on 101, which means we need to talk about Pismo. And we went back to Santa Monica, and I deep charged the car there to 100% while we took the kid to the beach, because poor kid went down to Southern California and it rained the entire weekend. This kid is just screaming. We bought her a bloody kite, which I had to bring down. It's still in the box because it's just rain. If there's any wind, it's raining. And I don't mean just like raining, I mean raining. So we deep charged it there, and that took us we stopped for tacos in Santa Barbara. And we went all the way to not Santa Clarita. I forgot where it is now, where the Target is. And then, and I met a really nice guy who had a Mustang. And I want to share this with you for a reason. Boys and girls, we're going to run a poll on this one. So put your comments in this. If you know somebody's going in the same direction as you, and they leave before you, is it morally wrong to overtake them just so you know you can get to the next charger before them?
Guilty. You have no idea how many times on the trip I see a car unplug, and I'm like, I think I have enough. I'm not sure, but I'll unplug and just rip it because I'm like, I need to get to the next station before them. Because when it was a power sharing scenario, you need to plug in first.
Well, we're going to talk about power sharing shortly, but we had to, we headed up 101, and we're heading to Soledad, and they're doing construction around King City. And so I actually went cross-country. It was going to add 34 minutes to the journey. But ironically, that is the same road which I did the range test for the ID4 on. And so I happen to know about a back road. It's not a service road. You go through another little town and back around. But I knew I'd just keep moving the whole time. And I get on at Paso Robles, at which point, just before Paso, and we weren't stopping at Paso because, as you know, Joe, I've talked about Paso. Paso used to be unreliable. Now it's got new chargers. But, and this is my point, I'm not stopping. If I have to go into town on a Sunday, I'm not doing it. Because this is when people with Leafs and ID4s who charge up for the week ahead, they charge on Sunday night. I've seen this pattern too often. So, but my wife wanted to see if there's a fantastic little food market, and food market's the wrong word, but food court, but all organic and happy and everything else. They do really good noodles, and we need to feed the kid anyway. So we pull off at Paso, we get some food, I get back on, and I'm like 10 miles from Soledad. And I see this blue GT Mustang with a Berkeley plate on it. And I'm like, I'm going to hate myself for this. and I kept the hammer down until I pulled off. And I think I came in at like 3%. And I figured you'd already been and gone. Did you get stuck in the traffic? I felt bad. I gave him directions to the men's room in Food Max to make up for it, but it was. But the car charged like a beast there again, and I passed on a valuable lesson to that guy because the 3 main chargers were all working fine, but the CCS, the combo one, the screen wasn't working. I said, just leave it plugged in. You'll probably get complimentary. You'll probably get a complimentary charging session. And he didn't believe me, and he kept pressing the screen. I said, don't understand. The delay on that thing is so bad, you're canceling yourself out. Plug in and just leave it alone for 3 to 4 minutes. Just don't care about it. There's nothing else to do. Plus, none of these other cars are leaving. So just roll with it. And sure enough, it pulled up to 160 as soon as he finished. But only the car would tell him.
I've said for years, who was the person in charge that said that when you press continue, that's the same spot that stop will show up on the screen of Electrify America. There's 3 buttons. You could have chosen any of the other 2 to be the stop button.
That's absolute lunacy. Absolute lunacy. So anyway,
I was going to say I'm guilty of something similar to that. When I had the Polestar and I was leaving San Diego, I arrived in Eastern California. I don't know what the southern charge, El Centro maybe sounds right. And there was a charger open, which I already knew from PlugShare was only delivering 30 some kilowatts. And it also would have been a little bit of a hassle parking in there to actually get the cord to connect to the Polestar, just the way I would have had a shimmy in there. And I had already talked to the Rivian owner that was in the spot I wanted, that I knew was a healthy charger. He said, I'm going to be done in 5 minutes. Well, sure enough, another Rivian showed up behind me, and I just let him, go ahead and use the other one. And then I took the good Rivian one once that one left. And then once I was done charging, I recommended to him, hey, you might want to move over to this unit. It's working a little faster. So I was technically there first, but I didn't hesitate to wait for the good charger.
Well, it's similar experience. So I took the ID4. I did Roast Battle in LA last Friday. i5 has been, the Grapevine, they keep shutting it and opening it. And so that was a major issue. And, and I went backwards and forwards on whether to take the ID4 or the e-tron. Yeah, because I am lucky and I have that privilege. But there's reasons for both. The e-tron charges like a beast. But why did I take the ID4? Well, any idea, Joe? Why would I take an ID4?
You can skip e-tron? An extra charger?
Nope. And bear in mind that the e-tron will always charge much harder. So I gave up fast charging. I gave up, and it's not free for free charging, by the way, because I really don't care about the money on this one. What possible reason would there be to take the slightly more uncomfortable car to
The
drive?
only thing I can remember is you said when you're leaving your house, it's a different charger that you go to for your first charge. Oh.
Nope, not that one. Self-driving.
Oh.
The auto lane, correct, whatever you want to call it, is so much better in the ID4 than the e-tron. Not that much better, but this was going to be a stupid trip. So we left here at 11 o'clock. We is my friend RK, and I'm putting a video about this. RK didn't have his driving license, so he couldn't drive. So he was just ballast, and his job was to keep me awake. Drove down to LA, charged at Kettleman, and then charged at Burbank, topped up to 100% at Burbank. And I did put a thing about charged to 100% and did get some flack from some people. But I'm like, yeah, I'm pulling out at 99. But then I'm doing this so that my thing from leaving LA, I had to get across the Grapevine before the storm came in again. And because I knew I'd be sleepy, I was driving. There was 13 hours of driving and no naps. And
I was going to say, I'm not sure if we were ever traveling on the same day, but this was Wednesday a couple of weeks ago. I was going from Vegas to Phoenix, and I didn't even think much of it. I'm like, oh, I'm leaving Vegas. It's 45 degrees, whatever. I crossed over Hoover Dam, or past Hoover Dam, at about noon. At 12:30, I saw a tweet from NDOT, or whatever, Nevada, whatever, that they closed the highway I was on at Hoover Dam all the way through Kingman. And sure enough, I get right up to Kingman. I was stopped on the highway for 4 hours in a blizzard, and trucks could not go up a pass. They were sliding backwards and jackknifing. I was in the car on the highway, first time in my life ever with anything this bad, 4 hours. So needless to say, got to Kingman way later than anticipated. And then it made a white knuckle drive the whole way to Phoenix, because when I'm looking at, there's going to be freezing rain at night. Oh, not a problem. I'm doing the drive during the daytime. Well, now that was the freezing rain at night that I got to deal with.
Yeah. That is why I took the ID4, just because the travel assist is just that much better than the
And you know what
Audis.
Doesn't work in freezing rain? Autopilot.
Yeah, I found that out myself. But the network pretty much held up. They've replaced this. They managed to. They screwed up. They killed Gilroy, which is that's a 8-9 charger site. And I usually need like a 5-minute top up there just to get home. But they'd actually bring that back online. They did that upgrade really quickly. Like, I'm going to say within 6 days, which is within 7 days, which is not bad for EA. But I will tell you, that was a long drive. But those electric cars, they make it. I'm not saying they make it easy, but
just being stuck, being stuck on the highway, not needing to play the game of turn the car on, turn the car off. It just runs. It's just comfortable.
That is why I charged up deep into the pack at Burbank, so I could get back over the mountain pass. And yeah, that was probably that day, because the storms came in, and they came in behind me. We were ahead of it. It was the craziest thing. I was doing roast battle. I was the main card, headline, or whatever you want to call it. I won my battle. Normally, this was the night Chris Rock was recording his special on Netflix.
I watched that. That was pretty good.
So we were all ready to go, and everyone was expecting. We have friends over there, so we were going to go to the Comedy Store, and I was literally, from getting off stage, we did the photos that we kind of have to do for publicity and stuff, and we were in the car and gone within 15 minutes of leaving the stage. And the whole time we've got the weather app, and we're seeing this weather in San Diego, and we're just like, we gotta get. I was like, I just have to get over the Grapevine. There are 62 kilowatt chargers at Button Willows and somewhere else. Like, I'll use those if I have to. But I'm not doing anything till I get over. And between here and then, it was 90 miles an hour the whole damn time. And actually, in the end, it was fine. I got all the way to Kettleman at 2-3%, which spooked the hell out of my passenger who was getting severe range anxiety. And I'm like, why don't you pull off at Lost Hill? Because I told him about this. I said, dude, you don't understand. We've got, there's no point pulling in with 17%. No, we just keep going till we get to the next one and pull in nearly empty. And I'll be honest with you, the food at Curry Parkway is actually pretty good. The 24-hour Mexican, I will tell you right now that the carnitas taste really good at 3 a.m. or whatever stupid it was. I got home at 6 a.m. It was crazy. But 2 good road trips, both being documented. I am trying to edit them, but unfortunately I'm doing a new job. So which is why I can now wear my old job's jacket on camera, because I don't work for these people anymore. I can wear their jacket now. I couldn't wear it before because they had a social media policy.
The disaster I ran into is once I finally got to Kingman, the interstate was closed eastbound to Flagstaff. But then, of course, thank you to Tesla Nav of suggesting that we break all those laws and find another route around the closed ramp. Sure enough, take Route 66 a couple of miles, and there's a ramp that had no policing there. Yeah. So us and like 4 other cars all just hopped on and went the 20 miles through unplowed highway to get to the highway we needed to head south.
Let's turn this to news because there's been a lot going on. I'm going to start with the Magic Dock. So yeah, we're the last channel to talk about this. Now, if you go to my channel, to regular EV Dad, I actually did. It was a day or two later, and Joe and I talked about this because I was sick at the time as well. I can't remember what the deal was. I wasn't feeling well, and I was working 2 jobs. I was working 2 full-time jobs at the time.
I had a major brain fart happen in Phoenix. I'm pretty sure they were installing Magic Docks when I was there charging, and it just didn't occur to me until 5 more miles down the road. I'm like, that's probably why they had the chargers ripped apart. It was like I saw them installing something, and then all of a sudden I see all the news of chargers are open, and I'm like, oh, geez. So wish I had circled around for that.
I don't think they did.
I don't know if they're activated. I don't know how fast the turnaround is from when they install them to flipping the switch. But there was Tesla service there, and they had a bunch of these superchargers had the faceplates ripped off that they were doing something in there. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, if they're active, they're not active. Ooh. No, that's a wall connector. So as it currently stands, today being what is the date? Like the 16th? 15th. There's still only 11 sites, 13 sites. There's 2 sites on the West Coast, one outside Santa Cruz, one up near Sacramento, and then the others are in New York State and Connecticut.
And it's roughly what, a 20 cent per kilowatt hour premium or something around those lines.
It's variable, but it's between 40 and 60 cents. You can pay $13 to be on a plan and get a disc and basically pay what Tesla people pay. So you've got a couple. I'm looking at them now. Oh, in fact, they've switched on a lot just in the last week. So there's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 open on the East Coast. Well, not really on the coast. Oh, no. There's an extra one. So they've now opened the one. I've been there, actually, in Long Island.
It's all New York still, though, right?
Shirley.
Just within the New York borders.
No. Shirley, Albany, near Ohio. Well, no, you're right. It's on the New York side. Yeah, it's all in New York State. Yeah, Albany. So they're all within the New York State. Tesla has said so little about what their strategy, what their rollout strategy is, what the timing is.
We know there's some sort of funding behind it because there was a meeting at the White House, and sure enough, shortly after, the switch started getting flipped on these. So pretty sure it unlocks Tesla's potential to tap into federal funding as far as, having a nationwide EV charging network.
Now, what's interesting is that Tesla has actually turned down some money. So there was $6 million available for them to open up to 640 chargers in key parts of California. However, Tesla has actually declined that because they had to have credit card swipe things and displays on them, and Tesla has been quite clear that they believe it's the app or nothing. I can see both sides of the coin. They're coming at it, well, not everyone can use an app. Well, at this point, I'm like, well, if you can't,
Yeah, it really just becomes a cell service issue. But even Tesla can fix that because there's Starlink at almost every supercharger, so they can always make a guest network that people could tap into if their cell service wasn't working.
This is California, my friend, so this comes down to issues of disability and ability to, I don't know, but I'm figuring if you can't use an app, you shouldn't be allowed to drive. Brutal, yes, but but anyway, so they've started to turn that on. We've also got the supercharger version 4 is now running. The first one's in the Netherlands. It doesn't deliver any additional speed on a per car basis currently. What is interesting is we know that this thing can deliver megawatt capability. It's not something they're doing right. So this is, future potential for the Cybertruck, but it still seems to be limited to 500 amps and 250 kilowatts. So it's
and Tesla, I think, for some time has talked about maybe bumping like the long ranges to somewhere around 300, right? And then I would probably get dragged in to whatever that equal percentage is to be at the same charging times. So, but I'm not sure what their time frame on that is.
We'll see. Sorry, it was not. It's 400, whopping 420 charging points, which would have qualified for the funding. But Tesla has said no because now the big thing, the thing that will have most impact for people with the version 4 chargers is they're taller, and with that tallness comes a longer cable. As I said to Mrs. Regular EV, I'm tall, I have a big cable. Classy, I thought, classy. But that will make charging easier for other vehicles. I will tell you now, with the e-tron, I had to come in sideways to make it work. The e-tron charges on the driver's front quarter behind the wheel. And it's not that big of a gap, but it's clearly longer than a Tesla Model 3 backing up to it. So this will be a good thing. They turned down funding for 420 charging points, and ironically, probably what charging points I would have personally used. So one
pain point that I didn't realize I run into with my car was, with the Polestar, it was around 420 volts at all time, pretty much everywhere I was going. The ID4 was somewhere closer to 400 volts, and the Tesla, many times, according to the Teslafy data, I'm down around 370. So this became a problem at some of the Electrify America chargers, as we well know about their 350 amp limit.
Interesting. And we may be having some video issues, but we have learned to just keep going.
Keep powering through.
did you see the reporting on the Kia EV9?
I saw some pictures, and I'm, my favorite vehicle made right now is the Land Rover Defender, and if you can make an electric vehicle look even remotely like it, sign me up.
Just a big box with a big battery, and if they can deliver that thing below $80,000, that'd be fantastic. I gotta say, I think there's some serious. It's not going to be as premium as the Volvo, but just from a space available, it's the fact. I don't know if I care about the second row of chairs being able to turn around. Although with your kids, and I think if you could turn it around with somebody in it because they're annoying you, I think I'd pay for that.
It's an old Grand Caravan trick that they got rid of when they went to the Pacifica, so it must not have been that well used to justify keeping it around. Because there's always survey data, I'm sure, when they're redoing redesigns. So.
And then before we rip into Volkswagen, good news this week. Apparently a limited number of ID buzzes will be available in North America this
interesting,
summer.
Because I just saw a tweet from, I don't know if it was Volkswagen or who it was, but Gabriel Iglesias was leaning up against one, so not sure. That must have been something to do with that. I just didn't read through it clearly as much as I should have.
I haven't read it either. I just saw an article a few days ago, and but I will say this. So I contacted my local friendly dealer who is on the board of directors for VW's franchise network, and he called bullshit. Because their complaint is that they've not been available and that they won't be available and da-da-da-da-da. But I've said I'll put money right down right now because the buzz with a bigger battery would just become our weekend warrior thing. I would not bother with the Volvo. I don't know. Well, we probably would get the Volvo, but yeah, the buzz.
Is the American version even going to be made in Europe? Like, is there an extended version that exists at this point, or it still is just the 2-row that we've seen or heard of?
Nope, it's going to be an American version will be made, but it will be made in Europe. It will be shipped over, so it will not qualify unless you lease it. And Joe Manchin's not been able to squash that. We still don't know enough, but it'll have 100. It will have a bigger battery. So, we'll see what happens. I'm intrigued. Which brings me to my ID4. Which I can't talk about. And that is all you need to know.
Well, my coworker, as I think we spoke about, I'm not sure if this happened on the pod.
No. We haven't spoken. Because I can't speak.
I can tell you that my coworker happily took delivery of a 2023 about a month late, because when he was buying the vehicle, Volkswagen had it halfway in a garage and the garage door closed on it.
Oh, this we did talk about.
And so it took a month to do apparently simple paint repairs and get a new antenna. That according to what he told me, that was all that was damaged in this process. So they fixed something on the back, probably scuffs or paint, whatever, and then put a new shark fin antenna on it, and now he's a happy owner. And of course, he got home, and I said, did you set up your Electro America account? He's like, what do you mean? So I said, clearly, A-class sales staff over there to have given him his code and explained him through all the steps that I told him he's lucky to have someone who's gone through this process before to aid him through these painful hurdles.
Absolutely. Now, let me be clear. I've had discussions with VW. I've not been happy with the upgrade process, the fact that my car hasn't been upgraded, the fact that we still know nothing about the whole process. And I have had formal conversations with VW about it. I will tell you right now that the ID4 still remains with me. I am planning on it remaining with us for a period of time, but let's just say that I finally lost my my frustration levels peaked. And I would say if you're in a situation similar to myself where you are equally frustrated, then you should definitely reach out to the executive team at Volkswagen and express your disappointment in a car that was promised updates every quarter, which has never received a single update. That presents safety issues by the fact that you have no control over the volume quite often, that the screen will just become unresponsive. And yeah, you should.
It's obviously something, I was so frustrated with that's what was one of the key things that pushed me into the Polestar back then. I was just kind of got fed up with the update process.
I'm cheaper than you are.
Well, I profited off my ID4.
Well, that's true. Okay, so here's the problem I had. I would have done it, my friend, except for the fact that I'd sold the bloody business, so I couldn't afford to, not because I couldn't afford the money, but because there was no tax advantage to me doing it. So
can I throw a piece of Polestar news in this? And it relates into a complete waste of fossil fuels. So I got rid of my car December 30th, and me being at least enough tech advanced and smart enough to realize you don't delete the app off your phone because you still will know where the car is. So Tesla took the car to a local suburb auction house where they sold it. The car then was shipped down to Palm Beach, Florida. Then from Palm Beach, about a month later, this is now early February, the car moved up to Orlando to another auction house. Not sure what it was doing in Palm Beach for that first month, but whatever. It went back up to Orlando, where it has been sold at auction to Volkswagen of Naperville, Illinois. So it's right back here, about 20 minutes down the street from me. And that's the first dealer to have possession of it. So I went and printed the Carfax and all this great data. So now I actually can, things I should have done back in the past.
So how much is your car on
44
sale for
is
right
the
now?
asking price, and I sold it for $43,200. So they shipped it across the country twice, and they're asking $800 more than I had gave it to Tesla for.
I'd be interested to see how much it sold for at all.
Yeah, I know some people in dealer networks. I think they might be able to dig up that information for me if I'm assuming correctly.
Interesting.
So stay tuned on that. We'll try to uncover more about the adventures of my Polestar. I wish I knew where my ID was. That's something else that'd be fun to track down. I guess I could always do a Carfax on that one as well.
Well, you could, Joe, but the app doesn't allow you to see where your car is because that's an advanced function. And on the next episode we will talk about CarNet and safety on the ID4. But for now, as we've done another hour of this happiness, we'll say goodbye and say we'll be around next week. Neither of us is traveling for a little while. Well, I am, but we'll still be able to do this. And we'll
Take
see
care
you
until next time.
Have a great day.